Hi students, can you see the slide? Is it visible to you? Hello?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So I believe you can remember what we studied before the quiz. We're discussing the evaluation techniques. And in the evaluation technique, we talked about this contingent evaluation approach. And also we talked about this hedonic pricing method. Mostly it is related with the housing price. Yesterday also we tried to review. Today I would like to have some discussion on the travel cost method, which has already been discussed or maybe actually made available to you because the file has already been uploaded and probably you have gone through that. So would like to see how travel cost method can help in having the valuation of environmental sites. Because in the case of travel cost method, we'll try to see the people's preferences for places. And as you can see, the values, economic value, as we talk about, so these are nothing but preferences of the people. How much people are willing to pay. So that to some extent tells us about the kind of value people might put on certain activities or maybe certain goods and services. That would like to see. So how travel cost method actually approaches the issue of valuation, that we'll try to have a look at. Already you know, so the steps, different stages, so those things we can have a look at. But before going to that, tell you a little bit about. See, once this valuation is over, it will require maybe one or two classes. So after that, we'll be left with the last unit, and that is the unit on environment and development, or in a sense, you can say the relationship between development and environment. So that unit will require another 4-5 classes. So ideally, we'll be in a position to finish off by the first week of April. So we had planned for two more quizzes. One is scheduled, I believe, on 24th. So we have to verify whether that's correct or not. And the next quiz is scheduled for, I think, April 9th. But April, that date probably has to be changed a little bit because I may not be available on 9th. In that case, my suggestion will be to have the quiz on 7th. So that date has to be kind of rescheduled. So that is my suggestion. We can have it on 7th of April. And then after that, I think 14th or 15th will be holidays. We'll get 16th as another day immediately after Bihu. Then 21st, we have planned for the in-semester examination. I believe that is fine with you because 16th probably may be the last class for us. Of course, the courses can be finished before that as well. But if you require, then I can have the class on 16th as well. But the last date or the quiz means like the last test date will be 21st April. That is for your kind information, right? If you have any issue, please let me know. Are you fine with it? Or you don't have any question, you do not have any observation, you do not have any view. Hope you are there in the class. It's okay. As I told you that would like to have a look at the travel cost method as an alternative method of economic valuation. And this method is considered to be a very old method or approach to environmental valuation. It was said to be proposed by Harold Hoteling. So when he wrote a letter to the U.S. Forest Service in the 1930s, but of course he didn't directly apply this as such, and he didn't popularize this one. The systematic application of this at first was in the 1950s by Wood and Price, and later on it was popularized by people like Clausen and Nash in 1966. So here the basic premises of the method is that this method looks at how far visitors travel to come to a site. You know that there are a lot of values for people. People prefer to visit or maybe go to certain places. So this preference itself actually tells us how much valuation or how much value the people place on those sites. Okay, this is mostly the recreational values that people might be deriving from these sites, and accordingly they want to visit them, and then they want to get a direct benefit or maybe direct recreational benefits from this visit. So the basic premise is rest on these. The people or visitors travel to come to a site, and they bear cost to visit those places. It might be national park, it might be some estate, it might be anything actually where they can get some recreational values. So the hypothesis is that this cost that the people pay for visiting certain sites, so these are at least equal to the minimum value of the benefit people get when visiting these sites on their environmental goods or services. So in essence, you can say their preferences for these places will represent their valuation of the kind of attributes of these environmental sites. Okay, this might be in totality or this might be in terms of different attributes. For example, if we talk about a particular national park, this national park might be famous for different activities. So it might be famous for flora, it might be famous for fauna, it might be famous for one-horned rhino, it might be famous for maybe kind of tiger, Royal Bengal tiger, it might be famous for lion. So those are certain attributes. So it's not only fauna, it might be flora also. A lot of kind of endangered species might be available in those places. So actually their preferences to visit the place also represent their valuation of these different units or different attributes of the national park, or maybe the national park, the value of the national park in totality. Okay, so that way they express their preferences for these products or goods or services. So what happens, this travel cost may be used as a proxy for the price of visiting outdoor recreational sites. Okay, in essence, what you can see that the recreational benefits at a specific site can be derived from the demand functions that relate observed users' behavior to the cost of visit. Basically, in the case of demand function, we see how much of the product is used or demanded by the people at different prices. Here also, depending upon the cost of visit or cost of travel, okay, the number of visit of the people will vary. So that number of visits might be considered to be the quantum of the product demanded and the price or the cost that they will be incurring. So that will represent the price. The higher the price, the expectation is that the assumption is that the number of visits will be less. So that way, there might be a demand function for the sites based on the prices to be incurred for accessing those sites. Okay, so that will give us idea about how much people are willing to pay. So what are the steps of analysis? First of all, the cost of travel is estimated, cost of travel and visit for each regions of origin. Okay, in essence, so there will be travel cost, there will be kind of entry fee. So all those things will be there. So those things are to be taken into account. And many a time, so this is done through individual travel cost method. In the case of individual travel cost method, as we pointed out, so there might be kind of individual interviews with the help of certain schedules or questionnaires. So certain information about regarding the visitor's trips, expenses, and other characteristics in the form of maybe socioeconomic information of the visitors might be collected from there. So what is the age of the person who has visited, the income level, education level, family background, so many other things might be, so many other information might be collected from the people, from the visitors out there, which will ultimately help in identifying so what determines the demand for these type of trips for those visitors. So after that, the demand for the site is estimated depending upon the cost of travel and visit and other characteristics. So there might be a lot of characteristics as I pointed out. So based on these things, the demand for the site might be determined or estimated. So you already know about that. There might be two different options for applying the travel cost method. One might be the simple zonal travel cost approach, which is which uses mostly the secondary data. Of course, in some cases, some simple primary data may also be collected from the visitors. This method is applied by collecting information on the number of visits to the site from different distances. Of course, so different zones can be identified, and these zones will be based on the distances. Accordingly, we can find out. Distance will play a very important role in the number of visits because distance is related to the cost of travel as well. So that way, so different zones will be identified based on the distances from the sites or the places of destination. The other approach is to apply an individual travel cost method in which a more detailed surveys of the visitors are carried out. So in this case, as I pointed out, so there might be different instruments of collection of data. It might be questionnaires, it might be schedules, all those things. So sampling has to be designed. And of course, there are issues out there. Certain sampling bias might be there. It's better to take care of those things. Otherwise, the sample which is actually chosen for representing the population, that may not be a very good sample, or maybe it may not be consistent. It might have certain biases out there. So in a sense, the individual travel cost approach is similar to the zonal approach. Only thing is that it uses the survey data from individual visitors. The statistical methods are being used to estimate the demand function and also to find out the factors which will be influencing the demand for the sites or the resources. So these, so since we will be resorting to a lot of data from the individual visitors, so obviously, okay, so it might involve a lot of steps or a lot of stages. So collection of data itself will be kind of truncating. It's a huge affair. Designing of the survey is important. So unless we have different characteristics of the visitors, it becomes difficult to find out the demand for the sites from different categories of people, be it income categories, be it kind of social categories, and so many other things are there. So that's why it seems to have involved a lot of data collection activities, and also it might be a slightly more complicated analysis. But since the actual visitors will be interviewed, so the information from them will be directly collected. So that's why the data collected will have more reliability, and that's why it will provide relatively more precise results compared to the zonal cost approach. Another two approaches are there, alternative approaches. One is the hedonic travel cost model. So in which case, effort is made to place values on the characteristics of recreational resources. So in different sites, there will be a lot of different recreational resources. Instead of talking about the value in terms of totality of the resources, individual attributes or characteristics of the resources will be evaluated, and their values may be estimated, and accordingly, the total valuation of the recreational site can be estimated. Another approach is to go for random utility approach, where survey and other data will be used. Statistical tools or maybe analysis procedure will be relatively more sophisticated. This approach assumes that individuals will pick the site that they prefer out of all possible sites. Individuals will have trade-offs between site quality and the price of travel to the site, definitely. So whether trade-off, so if they want to go for a higher quality site, then obviously price to be paid will be relatively high. So there is a budget constraint, obviously. So they may not be in a position to go for both at the same time, lesser cost, better sites. Okay. So this model requires information on all possible sites that a visitor might select, their quality characteristics, and the travel cost to each of these sites. Okay. So this is another approach, but mostly we'll be focusing on the first two approaches. These are the steps, different steps which are outlined above, outlined here in the slide. This method is applied by collecting information on the number of visits to the site from different distances. Because the travel and time cost will increase with distance, this information allows the researcher to calculate the number of visits purchased at different prices. In essence, this is nothing but kind of a demand function. And based on that, the consumer surplus or economic benefits can be estimated, right, for the recreational services of the site. So in the first step, so there is an attempt to define a set of zones surrounding the site. So these may be defined by concentric circles around the site or by geographic divisions that make sense. For example, if somebody wants to visit, uh, for example, Sundarbans, then probably you can find out different zones as per distances from Sundarban to other parts of the country, and accordingly you can have different zones. For example, it might be kind of northern zones, or maybe Punjab might be one zone, Gujarat might be another. So you can consider the states also, like the counties that may be taken into account in the case of European countries like England. So that way, in fact, at different distances, means in fact, zones might be uh, identified at different distances from the site. So that is the first step. The second step, information on the number of visitors from each zone is collected, and the number of visits made in the last year. Okay, so two things are there: number of visitors from each zone. If we are talking about suppose Gujarat or maybe kind of Rajasthan, okay, how many visitors were there from Rajasthan last year, and how many visits they made in the last year. In the third stage, there is a concept called visitation rate. That visitation rate concept is being actually defined, or in essence, you can say, to calculate the visitation rates per 1,000 population in each zone. So this is nothing but the total visit per year from the zone, uh, which is to be divided by the total population in thousands of the zone. Okay, so how many visits are made from the zone divided by the total population of the zone. So that ratio, actually, that rate will tell us the frequency of visit, or in a sense, kind of visit from that zone to a particular site. That will be given by this visitation rate. After that, the average round trip travel distance and travel time to the site for each zone will be calculated by using the average cost per kilometer and per hour of travel time. Okay, so there might be different ways of estimating the travel cost. Okay, so one might be on the basis of the average round trip travel distance. Okay, so based on that, so how much of course they have to pay, or maybe the travel time. Okay, so to the site for each zone has to be estimated based on that kind of travel cost may have to be estimated. Now, in these case, when you talk about the time part, the one obvious thing is that we have to take into account the cost of travel time as well. In a sense, we can say that what is the opportunity cost of time that is taken or invested or maybe spent in the name of traveling to the place. So already yesterday I talked about that. Actually, this is another thing. This is an implicit value of the cost of time that is to be taken into account. Because what we feel is that, you see, there is an opportunity cost involved, opportunity cost associated with this time which is taken for traveling the sites. So this time could have been probably utilized for other works which might have given some kind of ill to the person concerned. So in essence, we can say that the person would have been in a position to earn something by investing that much of time in certain other activities. So that is taken as a proxy for the cost of travel time, and that value is also included in the cost of travel. So how to estimate this travel time or maybe opportunity cost of time? So that is one issue, obviously. But the fact is that if you take it into account, that gives an idea about how things are being carried out. And this is an important thing as well, because time has a lot of alternative uses. So if I am using it for this purpose for traveling a particular place, so probably I am losing out on using that time for other productive works. After this average round trip, maybe cost of expenses or cost of travel is estimated, then the next step is to estimate the equation that relates visits per capita to travel cost and other important variables. So in this sense, we try to have a cause and effect relationship between different variables and different independent variables, which may be visits per capita. Okay, number of visits in essence we can say. So number of visits might be associated with the travel cost. The higher the travel cost, lower will be the number of travel or maybe visits to the zone or to the site. Similarly, there might be other variables. For example, somebody having higher income, other things remaining constant, might be willing to visit more. So the number of visits for those people might be relatively high. So there might be a positive relationship between income level and the number of visits. Okay, other things remaining constant, we can always try to find out which are the other relevant variables which might be having some kind of influence on the number of visits. So that actually decides on the demand for these sites as well. So once this is done, the demand function for an average visitor can be estimated. So that basically tells you so how much of the product will be demanded on an average, okay, at different prices, right? So if we take this model into account, so this model might be taking help of or maybe incorporating a number of other variables. There might be demographic variables, for example, age, whether a kind of relatively young age population will prefer visiting more, or whether elderly population will be more interested to visit those places, whether males are more interested in visiting, or maybe females are kind of taking up more travel to these places. So those type of things can be estimated. So that's why the relevant variables like income, age, gender, education levels, all those things will be considered out here in the regression model, and these things will help us in estimating whether the number of travel or number of visits to the place will be varying according to this type of socioeconomic or maybe demographic variables. The demand function for visits to the site is constructed using the results of the regression analysis. In the case of the demand curve, the first point on the demand curve is the total visitors to the site at current excess cost, assuming there is no entry fee for the site. And then finally, the total economic benefit of the site to visitors. So that is estimated. And since we are talking about only the consumers, and normally in the case of value, consumers will be valuing it. Although in the case of market products or market the products produced in the market for which price is available, we normally say that price will be giving us the value, but actually that is not correct thing. Price is actually the minimum amount that people are willing to spend for getting the product, but actually they are willing to pay more than what the price in the market prevails. So that way, in fact, anything above the price below the demand curve, that will represent the kind of value for the customer for that particular product. So in essence, we can say that the totality of these individual prices people are willing to pay for the product above the price line, so that will represent the value for the product. So in essence, we can say that consumer surplus, in this case, will represent the total economic benefit or value for the visitors. Basically, that is the area under the demand curve up to the point where up to the point or maybe price point. So that consumer surplus will be estimated. Now we can take into account a simple travel cost model. So it's a kind of mathematical thing which is actually given out here. You might have already gone through that. Suppose we consider the price to be the only sacrifice made by a consumer. So in that case, the demand function for a good where there is no substitute available is given to be x as a function of price, where price is the price or in essence cost which will be incurred or maybe spent in the name of traveling. X is the number of visits in essence, you can say so. So here we assume that income and preferences of the consumers remain the same. So if income changes, then obviously the number of visits will be changing. Similarly, if somebody is kind of fond of traveling, so irrespective of the fact that he may be having a limited level of income, limited amount of income, so he might be preferring visiting the places. So in those cases, the value of X will be changing. So that's why what is assumed here is that the income level of the consumer or income level of the person concerned and the preferences of him remain the same. So even if we say that here this P is there, P is a price in a sense, we consider that P might be kind of entry fee, other things will also be there, okay. So but apart from that P, the people will be spending money in other things as well. For example, so they'll be spending time in traveling. So that's why there is an implicit value for travel time. So that is to be taken into account. So other costs are also there. Travel cost is there, travel expenses will be there, and loss of time will be another area in which we have to consider the cost. So in that case, we can incorporate both the price. Price might be in the form of entry fee kind of a thing. So, and the other one is the cost in the form of travel cost as well as the time cost. So the demand function might be expressed as X is a function of price and cost. So if this is the condition, the utility maximizing consumers behavior, because normally what we assume is that the preferences or the demand will be represented through the utility function. And thus, normally we assume the rationality in consumers' behavior. So whereby every consumer tries to maximize his or her own individual satisfaction from the utility function. So in that case, we assume that the utility maximizing consumers' behavior should be reformulated. So by taking into account the cost part out there. So the function will be something like this. So if there are two goods or services, X1 and X2, there are prices for these two goods and services, P1 and P2, and excess cost in certain form might be given as C1 and C2. For the consumers, the income remains constant. He has a limited income. So in that case, there is a constraint. So whatever amount of expenses you will be making for accessing or for visiting the site, so this cannot exceed the income level of the consumer. So if R is the income level of the consumer, then the expenses made in accessing X1 and X2, so this should be just equivalent to the value of the income or budget that the person has. So here, if we consider U to be the utility function, which comprises of these two articles, two goods and services, then obviously as a rational consumer, the objective for the consumer will be to maximize his satisfaction or utility out of consumption of these two goods and services. So maximization of U, which is a function of X1 and X2, subject to the condition that this total cost for accessing the first commodity, so P1 plus C1, that is the cost per unit of X1. So when we multiply, so the total cost of accessing first commodity plus the total cost of accessing the second commodity, that total cost actually, the total expenses should be just equivalent to the total amount of money that is available with the consumer. So equation number 1 gives us the budget constraint. Now here there is a little bit of twist over here. So what we are assuming is that so we assume that X1 represents the aggregate of price goods and services, and X2 the number of annual visits to a recreational site. Okay, so in a sense we can say that X1 is something which is marketed product. X2 is a kind of visits to the recreational site. So this is the amount quantum. And for sake of simplicity, it is assumed that the cost of accesses to the market good is negligible. So C1 is considered to be 0. And the recreational site is free. So there is no cost involved in accessing the recreational site. So P2 is equal to 0. In that case, this utility maximizing function can be reconstituted, something like this. Optimization problem will be something like this, where the utility function has to be maximized subject to the condition that P1 X1 plus C2 X2 is equal to R. Here, when we are saying P1 X1, so we are assuming that this C1 is equal to 0. That means the cost of access to the market good is 0. And the recreational site is free, means in fact there is no entry fee out there. So that's why P2 is equal to 0. The only thing is the travel cost is there in case of recreational product, and in the case of a marketed product, so C1 is equivalent to 0. There is no kind of, you can say, excess cost is not there. So in that case, you have P1 X1 to be equivalent to 0. P1 X1 plus C2 X2 will be equivalent to R. So under these conditions, the utility maximizing behavior of the consumer depends on a number of things. One is his preferences, how much of the two different commodities or goods and services he will be preferring. So his preferences will decide, okay, so how much of utility he will be getting. So depending upon the income level, so he will be in a position to consume different units of the two commodities X1 and X2. So budget decides the satisfaction level as well, because satisfaction depends upon the amount of quantum of the two goods and services. So preferences will decide on his utility. Similarly, budget equation or budget, the amount available for him for spending on the two goods will decide on his utility or satisfaction. Similarly, the prices of the private good and services, P1, and the excess cost to the recreational side, C2. So these four things actually will decide on the utility maximizing behavior of the consumer. Okay. Now, this total travel cost method is based on the assumption that the changes in the cost of access to the recreational site have the same effect as the change in price. It is almost similar to the price in a sense. So the number of visits to a site decreases as the cost per visit increases. We're talking about the access cost over here, access to recreational sites C2. So if C2 increases, the number of visits to the site will go down. So under this assumption, the demand function for visits to the recreational site is estimated as X2, which is a function of C2. C2 is the excess cost for the recreational site. And it can be estimated using the number of annual visits, as long as it is possible to observe different cost per visit and up to the cost at which visit become equal to 0. Okay, so if we have a demand function for this recreational site, obviously, so from the observation from the data that has been collected by way of a survey, so probably we'll be in a position to estimate this demand function. The basic travel cost method model is completed by the weak complementarity assumption. It states that trips are a non-decreasing function of the quality of the site. Okay, it doesn't decrease, non-decreasing function trips of the quality of the site. Means in fact, okay, quality of the, irrespective of the quality of the site, actually the trips will be will not be decreasing in a sense, and that the individual forgoes trips to the recreational site when the quality is the lowest possible. Only then they will be actually foregoing the trips. Otherwise, they will be preferring to visit those places. This figure depicts the expected relationship between the number of visits and cost per visit given other variables. Other variables are considered to remain constant. Per visit increases. You see, so C2, the y-axis actually represents the cost, excess cost, and x-axis actually represents the number of visits to this recreational site. So as you can see, so this relationship is negative. As the cost increases, the number of visits goes down drastically. That is quite obvious. It's like a demand function for the sites. In the case of hedonic travel cost model, we are interested in the value of changing characteristics of a site rather than in the value of the site in total. In this respect, a hedonic travel cost model attempts to place values on the characteristics of recreational resources. So there are different characteristics probably. So for all these characteristics, so certain values might be placed. So this method was stated to be first proposed by Brown and Mendelssohn in 1984, and later on it was applied to forest characteristics by Anglin and Mendelssohn, and later on coastal water quality by Boxtel in 1987. Of course, it was a little bit, it preceded the application in the forest. The case of hedonic travel cost model, you can go through that. These are already given to you. Respondents to a number of sites are sampled to determine their zones of origin. The levels of physical characteristics are recorded for each site. After that, a travel cost function is estimated for each of the zones. So where CZ is considered to be a combination of this, CZ are travel cost, and Z, different Zs are the characteristics, and the Cs are the coefficients to be estimated. A separate regression is performed for each zone of origin such that each will have a vector of coefficients. For a given characteristics M, the utility maximizing individual will choose visits such that the marginal cost of characteristics is just equal to the marginal benefit to him. This is a kind of optimization rule. In fact, first order condition of optimization rule where the marginal cost is just equivalent to the marginal benefit. Of course, here we are talking about marginal cost of accessing a particular characteristic is just equivalent to the marginal benefit, which is derived by the person concerned. So a demand curve is estimated for its characteristics, regressing a site characteristic level against the predicted marginal cost of that characteristic and socioeconomic variables for its zone of origin. A separate regression is run for its characteristics. The expectation is that the coefficient on the marginal cost variable will be negative. So which will imply basically that as the level of a characteristic rises, people are unwilling to pay as much for its further increment. So marginal cost, if it goes up, then obviously people will be not willing to pay higher. So they will be actually demanding less of this. What are the issues and limitations of the travel cost method? So in a broad sense, this is what travel cost method is all about. The travel cost method assumes that people perceive and respond to changes in travel cost the same way that they would respond to changes in admission price. Of course, there are two different things here. One is the entry fee or admission price for different sites, and the second one is the travel cost. So obviously, here we assume that both will be behaving in a similar fashion, entry cost or kind of travel cost. Okay, so that is one assumption which is made out here. The people are assumed to perceive and respond to changes in travel cost the same way that they would respond to changes in entry fees or admission price. Defining and measuring the opportunity cost of time or the value of time spent on traveling is a problematic thing. It's not very easy to actually carry out an estimate of the travel time involved in the process or opportunity cost of time for traveling. So that's a difficult task to carry out. The time spent on traveling could have been used in other ways. It has an opportunity cost. So this should be added to the travel cost or the value of the site will be underestimated. However, there is no strong consensus on the appropriate measure. What should be considered as a proxy for opportunity cost of time taken for travel, whether it should be the wage rate or a fraction of the wage rate. Because you see, so whatever you take into account, the value chosen, for example, if you take the wage rate of the person as a proxy to the opportunity cost of time. So if it is a higher value, that amount might have a large effect on benefit estimates as well. If it is a smaller one, again, so that will have again impact on the benefits estimates. So obviously, so it depends. So if we take into account the wage rate in full, then obviously its impact will be different from a fraction of the wage rate, which is considered to be the proxy for the time travel for these sites. So depending upon this choice, the benefits will be varying considerably. Another thing is that if people enjoy the travel itself, then why should we estimate the travel time to be a cost? Rather, travel time can be a benefit for him, right? So if people enjoy the travel itself, the travel time becomes a benefit, not a cost. And in that case, the value of the site will be overestimated. Okay. So again, the availability of substitute sites will affect these values as well. So these are problematic things. The simple models assume that individuals take a trip for a single purpose to visit a specific recreational site, but that is normally not the case. People take multiple visits together. Okay, it's not that the amount of money that people will be spending will be only for going to a particular place. No, actually, people might be going for a professional walk, but at the same time, he may decide to visit a particular recreational site as well. Now, while talking about the valuation of the recreational site for that particular person, if we consider, okay, if we take into account the cost he has spent in the name of travel to the place and the kind of entry fees, now here this valuation based on his preferences in the form of his cost might be an overestimation of his economic valuation, because there are multiple trips involved over here. And if we are taking into account the entire cost only for the purpose of actually visiting that particular recreational site, so that probably will not be giving an appropriate measure of the values placed on these kind of recreational sites. Another problem associated with this individual travel cost method is the sampling bias. You see, interviewing visitors on site, for that actually sampling design has to be decided, and we are not sure whom will be in a position to meet. Suppose we try to find out somebody who is interested in visiting uh, Corbett National Park. So probably, so obviously, we'll try to find out means in fact interview visitors, and that will not be based on kind of random sampling method or in a purely probabilistic sampling technique. So it's many cases it might be the convenience sampling, and in case of convenience sampling, probably the interviewer, whomever interviewer finds at a particular point of time, might be interviewing. It also depends on the mood of the interviewer whether he is interested to give the interview or not. So many things are there. So that's why they cannot choose one over the other. Whoever might be willing to give you interview probably might be interviewed. So in those cases, there is a probability of biases in the sample selection. It might so happen that all the respondents might be from a higher income category. All the respondents might be having higher education level. All the respondents might be having a kind of higher income level. All those things are maybe other issues might be there. So all those things are actually creating a problem, because the low income group or maybe kind of those people not having enough of education, so they might be left out. In that case, it will be a biased sample, and the estimates based on the biased sample will not be truly representative of the population parameter. That is a problem associated not only with this but also with many other similar kind of statistical exercises. Measuring recreational quality and relating recreational quality to environmental quality can be difficult. So of course, so we are talking about in the case of yes, if the quality of the recreational site is good enough or maybe high or better, so in that case, probably the number of visits of the people may be considered to be relatively high. Now, these things actually, recreational quality may not be associated with the environmental quality as well, right? So that is another thing. But the fact is that we do not have a clear-cut yardstick how to link environmental quality with recreational quality. Because when you say environmental quality, we are trying to put some values on this. Basically, recreational quality will measure in our case the value of the environment, but whether that is a proper way of doing or not, so that is a question, right? Standard travel cost approaches provide information about current conditions, but not about the gains or losses from anticipated changes in resource conditions. Now, of course, that is a little bit difficult. It's not very easy to anticipate about the changes in the quality of the resources in future. You never know what will happen. Suppose if it is a kind of forest resource, there might be degradation in the future. If degradation happens, then obviously so that will be associated with some kind of losses. Okay, so those things will not be available. So as of now, so this exercise is entirely based on the current valuation, based on the current experiences of the people. What will happen in future? So that those things will not be made available or maybe will not be considered over here. In order to estimate the demand function, there needs to be enough difference between distances traveled to affect travel cost, and for differences in travel cost to affect the number of trips made. You see, so here demand function is to be estimated. Demand function is basically the number of visits at different prices. Now, these different prices are nothing but the cost that will be undertaken by the different people out there. So, if we need to have a proper demand function, so enough differences insofar as the prices for the visits are to be visible or are to be available. For that, the kind of survey is to be designed in such a way that we have enough difference between distances traveled by the different people, because travel cost has to be different. Otherwise, if we are concentrating on a particular zone where from where the travel cost will be more or less similar, then we may not be seeing a huge difference in the travel cost, and so that will not give us a proper shape of the demand function. Okay, so it's not well suited for sites near major population centers where many visitations may be from origin zones that are quite close to one another. But if it so happens that the zones from which the visitors will be visiting are close to one another, then obviously travel cost to the kind of destination might not be varying much. In that case, estimating the demand function may not be very good. So the demand function may not be properly defined and estimated. That is another issue involved in this process. The travel cost method is considered to be limited in its scope of application because it requires user participation. Many a time it becomes extremely difficult to find people to respond to the queries that might be there in the schedule. It cannot be used to assign values to on-site environmental features and functions that users of the site do not find valuable. It's a perception kind of a thing. So if we interview somebody, so if the person concerned do not find those on-site environmental features and functions useful, they will not be able to provide any value for those issues. So application part is a little bit tricky because users' participation is more important. So most importantly, it cannot be used to measure non-use values. Okay. In that case, so what will happen? Those sites which might be having some kind of non-use values. So those sites will be undervalued by this travel cost method. Okay, so mostly those sites where some kind of use values will be there and for which actually people will be willing to place certain values. So those sites can be properly valued by the travel cost method. For others, so where okay, non-use values are also sufficiently available, and if the viewers or maybe visitors cannot place values for this non-use attributes of non-use, then probably the valuation will be underestimated. As in all statistical methods, certain statistical problems can affect the results. These include the choice of the functional form used to estimate the demand curve, choice of the estimating method, and the choice of variables included in the model. In fact, similar thing we talked about in the case of construct validity, as well in the case of CVM contingent valuation method. Now, since we are talking about statistical models, the statistical models we build up based on the data that we have at our hands. So these things should be representative of the situation. Many a time we make mistakes in assuming a linear relationship between different variables, but it may not always hold true. So it might be some kind of non-linearity in the relationship between different variables, probably which we may not be in a position to recognize. So in those cases, there will be certain statistical problems. Similarly, some relevant variables may be omitted. So there might be omitted variable bias. Or in some other cases, it might happen that some non-important variables are included in the model. So that is inclusion of kind of irrelevant variable. So that will also create certain problems. Similarly, the estimation technique, what kind of estimation technique should be resorted to? So those are certain other things, so which might create certain problems insofar as valuation of, or maybe estimating the values or benefits of visiting a particular place. So accordingly, the values of the environmental resources might be either overestimated or underestimated. So these are, in a nutshell, the problems associated with the travel cost method. But the fact is that in certain cases, like where we have both use value as well as non-use value, probably one method will not be sufficient. In those cases, in all probability, a combination of these type of methods, so where one is the reveal preference method and the other one is the stated preference method, can be resorted to. So for example, in those places, those natural sites which have both use values as well as non-use values. So, so for those sites, probably along with travel cost method, where the visitors will be valuing the environmental quality of those places, along with that, kind of hypothetical willingness to pay concept may also have to be combined, so as to have certain valuation or maybe estimates on the values on non-use values of that particular sites or recreational site. So in essence, the combination of both these types of methods or maybe kind of procedures will be good to have a proper evaluation of this type of environmental resources where both use values and non-use values are considered to be prominent. So only one of them will undervalue or underestimate the value of the economic benefits received by the people out there. So with this, I would like to conclude this travel cost method. I hope I have covered all these methods, contingent valuation method, then hedonic pricing method and travel cost method. If you have any question here or till this point, you can very much raise your questions. Maybe if you have any comment to make, you are most welcome to make your comments. Please.